Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse alongside Mr. Martin himself. Mr. Martin himself. No,
Something like that. Anyways, we're
Mr.
metal
Martin
thrashing
Popoff,
mad.
the
That's the
man
problem here.
himself.
Yeah. Our brains are addled because of too much double bass drum right now.
I
So
guess so, right? I guess so. So how you going, my friend?
yeah, yeah, doing okay, doing okay. But, summer's coming, things are happening. I'm, get my summer tires put on the car. So all all
It's that
all
time.
is well in Toronto. Yeah,
It seemed like it was just yesterday you were telling me about the winter tires, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's over and
yeah,
done with now.
yeah, yeah.
So to continue on with these kind of throw a whole bunch of albums together and rank them thing by bands that may be somewhat related to a theme. Today definitely is that. We've decided to take a look at the 80s albums from the big four of Thrash, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax. I don't think anybody would doubt that in the 80s, those were the big four. I know lots of people have argued. We did a show on Hudson Valley Squares recently. You got some people argued that Metallica were never thrash again after And Justice for All, and that may be so. But in the 80s, these were the kings here. And a lot of people, Martin, have asked, well, why are you guys stopping at 1989? Why are you stopping there when some of these bands released some great albums in 90, 91, 92? What do you think about what do you think about that, Martin?
Well, it's because hopefully we have more weeks to live, so we can do more shows, right?
That's right.
So and we started thinking about the '90s, going, that's actually maybe even more interesting than the '80s story, right?
Yes.
Because it's more peaks and valleys and up and down, and people trying different things, right? So, kind of looking forward to that show. We haven't discussed fully if it's just the '90s or the '90s and beyond or whatever, but it might be just the '90s. There's a lot of concepts in the '90s to talk
Yes, I
about.
think so. So that's the reason. Because a lot of people are like, "Oh, but rest in peace," and yeah, we get it, we get it. But
Yeah,
that we're going to save for another decade, because
yeah.
another show for about another decade, because I think that we have enough to talk about here with what many people consider most of these bands classic albums. Again, the Rust in Peace thing is kind of the outlier, right? Because that is considered by many the ultimate Megadeth album, but it falls just outside of this timeline. So, but I think Megadeth does okay on their own with what they got in the 80s. So we've got, what do we got here? 13 albums, Martin. So do we want to do what, four at a time?
13. I thought I had 15. Oh, let's see. 15, well, we'll see how it goes. You want to go three at a time and see where we end up?
Yeah, we can do that.
What are we going? Did I stick in an extra here or something? We got Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax. Well, let's see how it goes. Whatever. We'll find out what the problem is as we go along. So.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so man, I gotta say first of all, this was a traumatic experience for me because it made me feel old and it made me feel like a poser because I'm going through this stuff and realizing a lot of it I'm liking less than I did before, but I'm not completely a poser. I mean, I've done a Metallica book, right? I've done a three Thrash trilogy, 900 pages on Thrash from 83 just to 91. This is all like timeline and quotes and talked to all these guys over the years. I've done a Megadeth book and I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm playing these albums and going, I don't remember this song. I don't remember this song. I don't remember this song. I don't play this stuff enough. Right. So I feel like a poser and I don't have physical copies of a lot of this stuff anymore. But, as we go along here, yeah, certain concepts will come out here, but I just felt like, I've always been thinking in the back of my mind, I'm going to quit everything and retire soon because I'm a poser. There's a lot of things I feel like I don't know much about, or I did in the past and I don't anymore. Right.
The birth
So
of Martin Poser Popoff happened
exactly.
today, folks.
I'm a thrash poser, but the funny thing is as we move along into the 90s and the 2000s, there are bright moments along there where I'm actually more invested, right? So this is going to be a funny experience, but and speaking of not being a poser as opposed to being a poser, my first choice here, Slayer, Show No Mercy. I wrote a 7,000 word story of this and at Zunior.com, you get it for $1.99. I've got all these, single album things and the top 20s and all sorts of stuff. And a lot of it's thrash and things I don't listen to anymore. But here's an example of one where I wrote a big, long story of this. I have never written a Slayer book, but so let's start with Show No Mercy. Not certified, December 83, this thing comes out. Um, this was an interesting one. Got this as a new release as a kid. Well, kid, I was 20 at the time. And you know, what I like about this album is they always felt like the smarter, more professional Venom. They looked like Venom. They've got the eyeliner, that bad picture on the back, which by the way is going to be in the next Contrarian shows because, well, long story there, these album cover shows. But what I found with this album pretty interesting. Yeah, there you go. So the interesting thing about this album is it really actually feels really quite professional. It's produced by Bill Metoyer, slash Brian Slagle. The one thing people do complain about with this album, it's got a very soupy, wet drum sound, loud, wet, soupy drums. Kind of weird. It's not particularly fast. But when it is fast, there's a little bit, it's not properly palm muted and locked down like a Metallica, but yeah, so I barely listen to this album anymore, but I do find that I do remember it as being super professional, very different, super extreme for the day because it's very overtly satanic. Like I say, it's like the response to Venom 6,000 miles away, right? Yeah. 3,000 for the Atlantic and 3,000 for continental America, right? Although, it's literally, it's kind of the start of thrash, and people forget it as the start of thrash because Metallica gets all the praise, but it's close enough in time, as December 83 to be there. So yeah, kind of a funny one. It's to me, well, actually, I'll mention this concept as I move to my next one. So my second from the bottom, I'm calling this 14, is Hell Awaits. So April 85, again, not certified. At this point, I do remember, great album cover as well. I do remember getting this album at the time and feeling Slayer hasn't really advanced all that far. They're kind of more extreme. The production's a little better, but they haven't particularly gotten to be better songwriters. It's got longer songs on it. And what I find with this record is, you can almost picture them not being all that much of an improvement over Exciter, Heavy Metal Maniac, Violence and Force. So it kind of feels like it's in that realm. It just feels like a slightly sharper, more powerful sounding Slayer, better drum sound. But I barely remember any of the songs on here. There's a lot of super fast stuff. There's a lot of D-beat drumming, a lot of that punky sort of drum thing happening. But yeah, double bass. But just, it's not a record that I really go back to all that often again. The main theme here that I found with this exercise is that it's confirmed for me that I had this falling out with Slayer and I never really went back to that early stuff. And I also had a falling out with my next band, even though I've written a 340-page book on the Megadeth. Killing Is My Business there's the redone cover. The first one, this is illustrated, and the first one was more of like a little kind of collage together little sculpture, right? It was very creepy looking, right? But so I remember getting this at the time and feeling, so again, June 85, this has not certified either, so it's not even gold. But the thing I feel about this, so this is that classic lineup of all I can remember with this record when it came out even as well is the bad blood and the revenge and the heroin and the our drummer's kind of a fusiony drummer and things like this. And Chris Poland is also kind of like a futuristic guitar visionary, right? And then Dave with all his talent and Dave Jr. in there. But Gar is considered, again, just the squalid drugginess of these guys, and we've lost Gar. But Gar was considered, a fairly complicated drummer. And so with this record, it always bothered me that it felt very cerebral, but the production was really rough, and I think even the playing is kind of rough and kind of loose on it. So I don't have a lot of love for too many of these songs on here. Of course, we get the get the reboot of Mechanics on here. We've got Love It to Death. I hate these boots. You know, can't stand that they stuck that on there. Chosen Ones is pretty cool. That's almost like mid-paced, a little bit like later Megadeth. But yeah, my bottom rung here, my bottom three, not a lot of love for these albums, unfortunately. So I will stop there.
And you were correct. It is 15.
Is it
I somehow forgot South of Heaven on this list. So yeah,
okay?
I just inserted it back in, and we're all good.
Okay.
We're on
All
point.
right. So you want to do three then?
Yeah, three sounds good. So all right,
Okay.
so I'll do three. All right, so my number 15 is going to be State of Euphoria by
Yeah.
Anthrax, which I do not have a copy of that. So, you were talking about how your tastes have kind of changed towards some of these bands all these years later. I mean, I was a huge Anthrax fan back in the day. But once this album came out, I think to me, their whole shtick kind of got a little, yeah, I remember seeing that back cover and I was kind of like, them with the shorts, the wearing the jams and all that. It just, to me, it started to lose its luster a little bit. And I find, going back to this album, there really isn't a lot on here I really care all that much about. I remember like everybody was into Antisocial at the time. I can't even listen to that really anymore. Be All End All is pretty good. Schism, I think, is a pretty good track, but for the most part, I just don't find this album all that interesting. And to me, it's just kind of like jokey, New York urban thrash type of thing. It doesn't hold the weight of so many of the other bands that were around at this time who were doing this type of music. So for me, that was an easy pick for number 15. Number 14, I'm going to go with Killing Is My Business. I agree with you. I never really gravitated towards this album all that much. I know a lot of people like it because it's so raw and it's got this kind of pissed off nature to it. Dave's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove. The guys are great players. Um, to me, like Peace Sells was such a massive improvement over this. And whether you like the original mix of the album or the later remix, whatever, the songs are the songs. I like some of the stuff. I think the title track is good. Last Rites is good. Rattlehead is fun. Skull Beneath is good. I agree with you. These Boots is not very interesting. Mechanics, it's just like kind of like a rehash of the Metallica song, whatever. Chosen Ones is okay. It's okay. It's not a terrible album by any means, but for me in the Megadeth catalog, I tend to reach for this kind of the least. Out of any of the kind of classic era albums. To me, it's like, I don't know, it's just kind of, they really haven't kind of figured out their way yet. So that's my number, what is that, 14? And number 13, this may be controversial to some people, but I'm going to go with Fistful of Metal from Anthrax. I like it. Not the hugest Neil Turbin fan. I also think that this is a band that kind of like the Megadeth album. They're still trying to figure out their sound. It's very raw. It's definitely way more kind of early thrash than any of the other albums that they did. It doesn't have that big riffy thing going on like the next couple of albums. And there's definitely not all these kind of catchy thrash anthems like there are on the next couple of albums. But, Metal Thrash and Mad is really good. Death Rider's a great song. I think Soldiers of Metal and Subjugator are all really good. It's a really good album. It's not one of their classic albums for me. And again, the Neil Turbin thing, not a big fan. I know there's some people who kind of like the early Iron Maiden with Paul Di'Anno. I know a lot of people who say this is the best Anthrax album ever made, and that Neil was the classic singer for this band. I don't know about that. I don't think he was around long enough in the band for him to be called a classic singer in Anthrax, but whatever. I get its significance. I think it's a really good example of early kind of like New York area thrash. But I like the next couple albums, next two specifically, much, much more. So yeah, State of Euphoria, Killing Is My Business, and Fistful of Metal, 15 through 13.
Okay, I think I see a theme coming here with our final results. So I did a switch at the last minute. I'm going with Peace Sells next. So the funny thing here is that I've always felt that this album wasn't that much of an advance over the previous one, except the album cover was way, way better, right? And they got famous and people love this album a lot. It's got a great album cover, but I feel it's got the same sort of thing that bothered me about the debut with the band. It sounds like the band is falling all over themselves trying to get every idea in. kind of thing. And I don't find the production too great on it. Randy Burns, I really don't like Peace Sells as a song anymore. That song just grates on me. Various things about it, even the much famously vaunted opening bass riff and all that sort of stuff. I do like Wake Up Dead. I like My Last Words. Again, I Ain't Superstitious. They put that on here. Just this is the worst band for covers. Well, in the beginning, they actually have some really good ones later on. They do a great job of Paranoid. What else do they do a great job of? So some of the, and even Anarchy in the UK is kind of cool that they do that. I think they do God Save the Queen later too, but maybe not on now. But yeah, they're Thin Lizzy, right? Cold Sweat later on as well. So yeah, they get much better at covers, I think, as time goes on. But yeah, this idea of these jokey old school covers, I'm not a fan. But so I made a switch because I moved up instead of that. So Far So Good, So What? Playing it again. You know what? So terrible album cover. This has both better production and worse production than Peace Sells. I find that it's got a little bit more full range, and it's a little bit more of a corporate production, but it also brings in the super wet reverby drums that you even get on Slayer's Show No Mercy. But you also get it on I'm not crazy about the production on the second Metal Church album and the third Metal Church album. And I feel there's like sort of a tie in there kind of thing. But yeah, so Paul Lanny producing. This went platinum January 88. So not crazy about the first side of this album very much. You do get an instrumental. Anarchy in the UK, it's a cover, but 502 things are kind of picking up. Mary Jane. So one of the big problems with this album is Dave's vocals are mumbly and buried. They're really, really buried on this album. You can barely tell what's going on. But yeah, the whole second side, In My Darkest Hour, Liar, Hook and Mouth. Liar's got kind of a countdown vibe. My favorite Megadeth. Well, we won't go into that as a spoiler, but essentially the entire second side of this album really redeems this album for me, and I'm just really not finding the songs on either of the first two to put it up there. So go with that next. And my last one of this bunch is we've got it this way. Fistful of Metal. I really like this album, and I really like this band. This is Carl Kennedy has produced this. He's just got a new autobiography out. It's really cool, really thorough, great stuff in there. But what I like about this album is it's not particularly speedy. I do love the production on it. We always, when I got this, it slotted firmly into that space with the first Jag Panzer album. It also sounds to me like sped up, more alert Manowar. There's kind of a Manowar vibe. There's a Manowar vibe to Neil Turbin's vocals as well, and just the themes as well. But I just find that, and the vocal melodies actually, I just find that this is a really charming sort of quasi 1 foot in traditional metal, 1 foot in speed metal, and 1 foot in thrash. But the palm muting isn't there. The production is still rounded. So it's got kind of an old school production, but I think it's got a real charm to it. I think it's a really well done album, and a lot of great songs. I had a lot of time for it as a kid, played it a lot. Even I'm 18 is really solid on here. Just drumming. I mean, the drumming's amazing, right? On this record. So that is my next three: a couple of Megadeths and an Anthrax.
There you go. All right. So my 12 is going to be So Far So Good, So What? Yeah, I agree with everything you said. First of all, the cover is god awful. This sticks out like a sore thumb in their catalog as like one of the worst covers they've ever had. In saying that, it's a short album. I don't particularly like Anarchy in the UK as a cover. I think that's kind of like an absolute throwaway, and we could have had another song. I think that both Jeff Young and Dave Mustaine's guitar work is pretty well produced. The guitar playing is incredible. It's a shame that this was the only album that Jeff appeared on, because I think he's a pretty spectacular player and he fit right in with this band.
And Chuck Wheeler, the drummer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I agree with that. I think side 2 is way stronger than side 1. I think In My Darkest Hour is a top shelf Megadeth song. Liar is great. Hook and Mouth is terrific. I do like Into the Lungs of Hell and Set the World on Fire. Mary Jane's pretty cool too. I just think that there's not a lot of meat on the bones of this. There could have been more. There's like, you get that rib, Martin. That's like the bone is like gigantic, and you look at and the meat that's on it is delicious, but there's just not enough there, right? That's kind of like this album for me. But it's one of those one-off lineups from the band that we've heard the stories that have them imploding and whatnot. So but good album nonetheless, but not one of their best albums. Next up, so number 11, I'm going to go with Spreading the Disease by Anthrax. Again, another one of those albums that when I was younger, man, this was it. I mean, I saw them live so much around this time period, and songs like Medusa and Armed and Dangerous and Madhouse and Lone Justice. I mean, they're all really good songs. I really can't knock this album. It just doesn't, I find I don't listen to this stuff as often as I used to, but I think this to me is one of two albums in their catalog in this early period that really still kind of works for me. And I think was the band really figuring out their sound, really figuring out the lineup. The production's pretty good on this album. All those characteristics we talked about, the fast riffing, the palm muting, all that kind of stuff. I think Joey is sounding really good on this album. There are other albums that they've done with him where I'm like, kind of like, I'm not as happy with his vocals. I think he sounds great on this album. So, and some classic early Anthrax songs are on here as well. So that's that. And my next one, I'm going to go with Among the Living, which probably is my favorite Anthrax album. Again, you can make an argument for the two that came before it as more classic Anthrax before they became bigger. This is the album, obviously, that really put them on the map for a lot of people. Caught in the Mosh, the title track, I Am the Law is great. I think Indians is a terrific song. This is big, accessible Anthrax. This is thrash for everybody type of thing. It's got the New York attitude. There they are was in the subway there. Look at all those songs. You go see Anthrax in this time period, and they've got the crowd eating out of the palm of their hands. I mean, going to see an Anthrax show right around this time was absolutely an experience. And if you're like a New Yorker and you go see them in a club in New York City, and to see that mosh pit just going berserk throughout the entire show, that was an experience. That was an event going to see Anthrax. But for me, up until a few years later, a bunch of years later, when they wound up changing singers, I think this was their last truly great album for me anyway, until another album that we'll talk about in another episode. So those are my next three: one Megadeth and two Anthrax.
Okay, so number 9 for me is And Justice for All. There's my fully signed CD there of Justice. So Justice to me, I always think of this as a double album because I got it on vinyl. It was 1988. It was the vinyl year still. We had 2 more years of vinyl. And so in my mind, it's always been a double album. Obviously, there's the famous production. I remember getting it and not hating the production. I just finding it different. It was weird. It was cool. People don't mention enough that really I think the famous Vinnie Paul drum sound comes from this album a little bit, or inspired by this album, right? That very sort of techie sound. But to me, yeah, this is a lot. It's got a lot of credibility and credence as a not very commercial album. It was a surprise, and it showed the band as the sort of hallowed, deserving, one of the greatest bands of all time in terms of them wanting to be creative and move forward rapidly. So this is them really trying something quite different. So it's quite proggy with a lot of riffs, and even some of the negatives of progginess you could apply to this too, like you could say aimlessness or repetition, because there's some of that with it as well. But it's covering a lot of the bases of the earlier, but even something like Blackened is such a great sort of like microcosm of this idea of them being more creative. It's like, here we're going to do the thrash song, but we're taking it into an ethereal sort of atmospheric new place. We don't sound like a normal band anymore, kind of thing. And they were already moving into some really interesting production places previously, but yeah, so that is my number 9. I just don't revisit it very often. My number 8 is Anthrax, State of Euphoria. And again, One of my disappointments of doing this exercise is going back to these albums that I played so many times in the 80s and 90s and realizing, although I keep constantly playing later Anthrax all the time just by habit and, out of pure pleasure of wanting to hear later Anthrax, I don't play this stuff that much anymore. But in my mind, I thought, it's absolutely all classic. I just love it to death. And going through this exercise, I was going through it and I found myself sort of fatigued. To me, this is a little bit like Metallica with Justice, in that they're really diving into this idea of speed and punkiness and precision and a little bit atonal and moving away from particularly great songwriting, just getting kind of like dry and strange. It's a little bit like Justice. I find Joey's singing, sometimes the vocal melodies can also be a little simple or atonal and just like antisocial, essentially, right? I mean, a lot of the songs are kind of antisocial. But yeah, love Be All and End All. But it's just kind of a weird album where I'm not getting a lot out of too many of the songs. Who cares wins is a perfect example of that kind of atonal sort of thing. And yeah, I remember this bugging everybody at the time, but to me it was just to me it was a case of them just writing less good songs and just being more extreme, but also being more urban at the same time, like being more extreme but more New Yorky, more hardcore kind of thing. Okay, so that was my number 8. And my number 7 is Slayer Rain in Blood, which I literally don't have a physical copy of anymore. This was one of the big disappointments too. So going through this record again, I just realized how fast it is. Like, we all know how short it is and stuff. But, literally coming to the conclusion that Rain in Blood is actually the best song on it. It really, or Raining Blood is the best song on it, and Postmortem. So anytime there was a good amount of variety and them slowing down, I was more on board. But playing it again, start to finish, I realized that A, it's just too fast all the time for me, and B, this is the band. I was surprised, with the Megadeth situation for different reasons, but Slayer, I knew that over the last few years I've had a falling out with Slayer, and I just don't play them that much anymore. And just all the red and the black and like every album, the themes and the Tom's voice and the atonal guitar soloing that's a cliche that they use a lot. So just over time, I've kind of had this falling out with Slayer, as feeling like it's just thematically and almost like too many cliches. It was my biggest falling out, and my biggest ascendance of all these has been Anthrax over the years. So that is that all of my 1, 2, 3? A Metallica, and Anthrax, and a Slayer. Yeah. So that's 7 done. I think over to you.
Yeah, I've had a similar type journey with Slayer, I think. I find I can still listen to and enjoy the earlier stuff, but I don't do that often. And I find like everything after Divine Intervention, I just don't like it all. Like, I've tried, I just don't like it. And I don't know what it is. There's probably a variety of reasons, but yeah, I don't know. All right, so my number 9 is also going to be And Justice for All. So along with you, I never much had a problem with the production on this when this first came out. I remember, like, years later, everybody crying, hey, there's no bass on the album, right? Can't hear Jason, the new guy. Yeah, but I never, back in the day, I never really minded it much, because all I wanted to hear were those massive guitar riffs. But it's just interesting how, like, this is such a different album than Master of Puppets. And then everything that they did on this album, they just threw by the wayside for the next album. So this, at the time, this was kind of like a weird outlier in their catalog, and they wouldn't revisit this whole big riffy long song type of thing till much later on the more recent albums, because I think a lot of what people look at this is like, oh, the songs are too long, they go on forever, the riffs are too kind of cavernous and it's too proggy. They've been going back to that a little bit on their last three studio albums, right? For whatever reason, which is kind of strange in this day and age. But you looking back on it, Blackened is terrific. I think the title track is great. I still love One. I remember the first time I saw that on MTV, it just kind of like blew my mind, that video, and I totally dig the song. I like the fast stuff. I like the slow stuff. There's mountains and mountains and mountains of riffs on here. But yeah, it's kind of plodding to get through all in one sitting nowadays. Like I find whenever I put this on, I don't listen to the whole thing through and through because I just can't get all the way through it, right? But it's not saying it's bad. I think it's really, really good, but it's just an interesting album in their catalog because it really doesn't sound or feel like anything else. So that's my number 9. My number 8 is going to be South of Heaven by Slayer. So interestingly enough, Martin, when this album first came out, I was shocked because, it doesn't, speaking of not sounding anything like its predecessor, this doesn't sound anything like Rain and Blood. You talked about how Rain and Blood is from start to finish so fast and so pummeling. And then you get this, and Thomas singing in a much more restrained vocal style. The songs are a little bit longer, obviously a lot bit longer. The riffs are slower, almost doomy in spots. And I was not on board with this at all when it first came out. But I have grown to really enjoy this album for what it is, and I don't really mind the let's take a slower approach Slayer on this particular album. I think the title track is one of their great songs. Silent Scream, Live Undead are so good. I love Mandatory Suicide and Ghost of War. Excellent songs. I think their cover of Distant Aggressor is really well done. I think it's a very strong album by a band that probably just wanted to kind of take a breath. And then, the next album would kind of be somewhat similar, but moving a little bit more back to the speedier stuff of the albums before. It's kind of like a mix of the two. But I think it's a fine album. I think it holds up really well in the catalog. So that is my number 8. And my number 7, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning with Kill 'Em All. Great album. Again, Metallica never did an album like this again, because Ride the Lightning certainly doesn't sound like this, nor Master of Puppets. This is fast, it's frantic, it's baby Metallica. There's guitar solos all over the place, classic riffs. Hit the Lights is terrific. It's funny because so many people shit on Kirk Hammett and have for years. I think this is his best lead guitar playing on any Metallica album. And I know some people will probably say, well, because he's just playing the same solos that Dave was playing early on. That could be, but I really enjoy listening to him on here. Seek and Destroy is great. I love Jump in the Fire is terrific. Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Metal Militia. I mean, one classic after another. You got the cool bass solo. This is just a young band kicking ass, doing something completely different. And I still think it's a classic. I just enjoy other albums in these catalogs a little bit more, but this could probably rank higher for a lot of people, and I wouldn't be surprised. So
nice. Okay, well, this is a tough one. So I switched a couple things around. I think I will do this executive switch here. So I'm gonna go with Among the Living next. I do like this album. I think this might be the best produced. Oddly enough, it's Eddie Kramer, which is odd because this is not his wheelhouse.
no.
But I think that they get a really good, solid, heavy production sound on here. I love Caught in a Mosh. It's obviously a really cool, and I Am the Lost, same thing. Good mid-pace sort of sound on that one. Imitation of Life, killer riff there, and Indians is one of the great songs, great chorus on there as well. So I think you just get a lot of utilitarian, good, useful Anthrax on this album. Next, I'm going with Spreading the Disease. And here I think you get most of their, absolute classics. Lone Justice, I totally love on here. Fast mid-pace sort of song. The whole Wasted, part there. And Madhouse is absolutely one of their big classics. The Enemy is really cool, really stomping. AIR I like on here. Medusa, kind of Metal Church like again, sort of thing. But yeah, to me this feels like you've got Armed and Dangerous in there as well, but you get this leap. I always had in my mind that this is kind of like the East Coast leap that Metallica got from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning. I just think it's a really good collection of songs, 9 songs, great kind of lyrical themes on here as well. Another great production from Carl Kennedy, October 85, didn't certify this one. And then this one just kept climbing. This just kept climbing up the list as I found myself a poser with those other albums and not liking them enough and going, you know what? No, I don't need Megadeth albums in my life as much, and the songwriting is just brilliant on this, right? So the cool thing about this album is the production is so dry and yet powerful. It's just so cutting. It's so no nonsense, just a molten guitar sound on here. What I like about it is it has a little bit of the fistful of metal idea of 1 foot in traditional metal and 1 foot in the fast stuff. So, you get the likes of Four Horsemen, and definitely Jump in the Fire, and No Remorse, and Seek and Destroy. All 4 of those just have this combination of traditional British metal and new wave of British heavy metal. The heaviest new wave of British heavy metal. You do hear a little Diamond Head in the band here, but you also get absolutely locked down thrash, the palm muting. You think of Whiplash, and Metal Militia in particular. Hit the Lights is still a little ragged. I find, you can tell that's like, it's got a history, right? And I can do without the instrumental on here, or instrumentals they ever do, or anybody ever does, I could do without. But I just remember hearing this for the first time and just thinking, wow, this is different than anything else. It's as Phil Anselmo would say, it's the money riff all the time. That he said that was one of the key, reasons Pantera was successful. And I love that description, right? It's like, why don't we just do the money riff all the time? So yeah, this is a lot of money riffs all in a row. And I just remember thinking that the vocal, like you normally don't hear a guy bark out a vocal like that. That was kind of a new thing where it was not as melodic sort of thing. So that is my 6, 5, and 4, I believe.
It's a cool thing, Martin. All these years later, I can still remember that very, very first time that I heard that album. I'm envisioning the scene in my basement bedroom. My buddy came over, brought it over. He'd shown it to me, looking at the cover, putting it on, and thinking, "Wow, that's different."
Yeah.
And it's just hard to believe. Like, it's a story we can tell forever to our grandkids. Like, yeah, I was around when Metallica was nobody, when nobody knew who they were, and they were a brand new band, and hearing that first album for the first time, like all those years ago.
A funny thing about the differentness of it is it reminds me, I think of a band standing right at the lip of the stage.
Yes.
Bent forward into the crowd.
Yes.
With everybody, including the non-lead vocalist, singing the vocals at you, right? Yep. Barking the vocals at you, like almost falling into the pit.
You're right there. The stage is maybe yo high, and the hair is hanging down, and you're right here, and they're right there.
Yeah, it's just the sound. All the sound on the album, everything is just face forward, right?
Yeah. They played here in the Hudson Valley. They played in the next town over from where I grew up. They played in this tiny little shithole of a bar, and Chris Caffrey's band Anti opened up for them.
Nice.
I mean, this is, going way back to the beginning of this. And it's just incredible to think of the band they've become since then, right?
Yeah.
Insane. All right. Anyway, number 6 for me is going to be Master of Puppets. This is basically the album that drove me to claim Metallica were my favorite band at the time. So it took a superhuman band to unseat Black Sabbath as my favorite band at the time. But yeah, for about a 3 or 4 year period, Metallica was my band. And it really I loved Ride the Lightning. I love Kill 'Em All, but this album just drove me over the brink. And again, you can kind of see where Injustice for All was kind of coming with this, I think. The title track specifically, maybe bits of Sanitarium and Disposable Heroes, those big lumbering riffs that kind of go on and on for 3-4 minutes. But man, the fast stuff on here is great. Battery, Damage Incorporated is great. I love the title track. Sanitarium, Welcome Home was a great anthem to see them play live. I think the Leper Messiah is cool. Your favorite instrumental Orion is on here too as well. But yeah, classic album, great album cover. That's my number 6. My number 5, I'm going to go Hell Awaits. I will tell you right off the bat, the first time I played this album scared the crap out of me. You listen to the beginning of Hell Awaits, and you're kind of like, what is this? I remember at the time I was working for the campus radio station. I had a DJ slot, and I remember the first time I played this over, it would go out, the transmission would go out over campus, and I had one of my buddies say, go down to the cafeteria and tell me what the faces are looking like when I play the first song. And I played the first song I played was Ella Waits, and he remember telling me people were kind of like, what is this they're playing on the radio station? But yeah, I mean, so many great songs on here. This kind of goes a different route from the first album. We had these like shorter songs here. They're going for speed, they're going for longer, slightly more proggy arrangements and whatnot, but classic stuff on here. At Dawn They Sleep for me is amazing. Necrophiliac is so good. Incredible album. Ryan Scow's favorite album of all time. And my number three, I mean, this is kind of difficult. My top like five are kind of hard, but I'm going to go with Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
Classic album. My favorite Metallica album. Fight Fire with Fire is such a killer opener. I absolutely love Creeping Death. The title track is great, For Whom the Bell Tolls. The first Metallica song I ever actually heard was Fade to Black. And I remember Johnny Z himself was playing it. I walked into Rock and Roll Heaven North, which opened up in Warwick, New York. They had the store down in New Jersey. And well, actually, no, it's not the first Metallica song I heard because I heard Kill 'Em All first, but it's the first song I heard that made me want to go buy the album because both these things happened right around the same time. But yeah, there's maybe one or two tracks on here that aren't up to the rest of the album, but still classic, still this mix of brutality and speed and lots of melody. So that is my number three.
Nice. Okay. So my number three, I'm going with Slayer, South of Heaven. So loved this album to death when it came out. Still think it's absolutely great. To me, this and Seasons are my two favorite. I do like some of the later stuff, and I probably have more time for some of the later stuff than the earlier stuff. In fact, probably more than all of the first three and Haunting the Chapel for that matter. But South of Heaven, Rick Rubin, Andy Wallace have gorgeous, huge, massive drum sound. It's just a classic Rick Rubin kind of production, which really isn't on Rain and Blood particularly. But yeah, love South of Heaven, one of their greatest songs. Behind the Crooked Cross, I love on here as well. Live on Dead, Mandatory Suicide for sure, Mid-Paced. So yeah, this is my favorite era of the band, and I just thought probably right around this time they were the coolest of the big four. I thought they could kind of do no wrong. They were the most badass of the big four. But yeah, I think Anthrax has replaced them, as time, moving forward as the band that I feel is the most, I don't know, the most grown up or something. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Number two, I'm going with Master of Puppets, the 6 times platinum Master of Puppets, 86. This is basically, to me, this is, I love that for the third album in a row, they've innovated greatly on production. They would do it again, and then they would do it again, and they'd even do it again and again. I have a whole History in 5 songs with Martin Popoff episode just on the Metallica productions. It's just a fascinating story about these guys constantly looking for new sounds. And here, what they get is that super dry, massive, but still powerful drum sound and massive guitars. But the songwriting is really cool as well. Although I feel like so when I did that top 500 heavy metal albums of all time book, this won the poll because that was all from a poll as the greatest heavy metal album of all time. But to me, it feels like a bit of a ticking the boxes from Ride. But the songs are just so well put together and so memorable and so different. So that's Master. And my number one is Ride the Lightning, 1984, 6 times platinum. Also hard to believe it was that good, but or can sell that many copies. But obviously this is just a massive band, and people will get brought along with a band this massive and be able to get into
still
this
buying copies. Yep.
But I totally remember getting this and thinking the songwriting is out of this world on this. It is just so catchy and memorable, yet so sophisticated and different. And the playing is fast, and then it's slow, and then it's halftime, and then it's double time. And you just think like I remember dropping the needle on Fight Fire with Fire, and just like it was the best version of a fast song I had ever heard. And interestingly, I looked this up. To me, these records are so close together, these two, but they are recorded almost a year and a half apart. It's quite a big gulf. But yeah, my original copy of that was a UK one. I bought a UK Music for Nations copy of that. But yeah, then you got Ride the Lightning, which had everything. It's like serves as almost like a microcosm for the album. For Whom the Bell Tolls, just this beautifully well put together epic song with pregnant pauses and spaces in it, just really tasteful drumming from Lars. Side two, everybody puts down Escape, but I totally loved Escape. I didn't care that it had this little bit of commerciality in it because I love that little drum lick that's part of the main verse riff. And Creeping Death is an absolute classic as well. So I just feel like the songwriting is just as strong, if not stronger, as it is on Master. And it is the first. It's before Master, so it goes together with Master so well. Including all those matching up of the long instrumental matching up, and the about the same number of fast thrashy songs and fast thrashy bits, and you've got the Sanitarium and the Fade to Black matching up. So that bothered me a little bit, frankly, when I got Master. Although Master was incredible, but so by the time you got to the end of Master, and then even into Justice, you just felt like these guys deserve to be the biggest thrash band because they're just the best at it. They're just the best songwriters. They care the most, it seems, about production and being different and being a cut above, right? They just seem to be the most professional of all the bands. Every band had their aesthetic, but these guys just seem the most skilled at everything. So there you go. South of Heaven, Master, Ride.
And then they went and broke our hearts a couple years later, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I totally get your point about how the songwriting on Ride was just such a step above, as great as Kill 'Em All is. And to kind of go back to my story before, so that time where my buddy brought Kill 'Em All over and played me that, and I was like, whoa, that's different, pretty cool. I didn't go out and buy Kill 'Em All. It wasn't until I actually went and heard Ride the Lightning in the store that I was like, I gotta have this. And then I'm like, oh, I probably should get that first album too. And then that started my whole love affair with Metallica.
And Pete, it just ticks me off when you get the thrash snobs who say, "Oh, Exodus Bonded by Blood is better, man. It's the best. It's the best of all the thrash albums and stuff." And it's like by the time you hear Ride, and by the time you hear Master, and then Bonded, comes out belatedly, frankly, had it come out, had those songs been recorded properly and come out right away, it would deserve more praise. But I don't think soon as Metallica happens and proves how good they are, Bonded by Blood, you could tell the songwriting's not as good, right?
Yeah, there's something about there's a love affair with Bonded by Blood that's been going on for forever, and there's a certain audience that like that is the classic thrash album. I mean, I get it, whatever. It's a great album, right? It's a legendary album.
I mean, they might have been better than Anthrax and Slayer at that time for one brief moment, right? But then Slayer grew and Anthrax grew, and I don't think, I mean, Exodus was good, but you just, and again, I just, same thing with Testament and early Overkill. I didn't feel the songwriting was really there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's me being a poser again. So
Poser Popoff at it again.
Yeah.
All right. My number 3 is Rain and Blood. Terrific, compact, ferocious. Man, I was so on board with this, and I always thought that back cover of them looked just completely awesome. No holds barred, Slayered, from the production values to the ferociousness of the song. To me, it basically takes Hell Awaits and even kind of compresses it all together. But I mean, I agree with you. I think the last 2 tracks, Postmortem and Rain and Blood, are the best songs on the album. They're terrific, but I love Angel of Death and Altar of Sacrifice and Jesus Saves. I like it all. I think it's really good. It goes by way too quickly. But it's so many people say that this is the greatest Slayer album. It might very well be, but it's not my favorite Slayer album. And you crushed me when you put this all the way down at the bottom
Oh
because I
wow.
love Show No Mercy.
Boy, we have a massive difference in this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love Show No Mercy. I think it's great. I love this is like Baby Slayer that haven't really figured it all out yet, but I love it anyway. It's
Yep.
just so different from anything else in their catalog, and I like the kind of it's like instead of like them being like we're going to be the fastest, loudest, most ferocious band on the planet. To hear it's just like it's just some really cool complex riffing going on, very very different. It's not as over the top as some of their other stuff. I mean, just the Antichrist, Die by the Sword, so good. Fight Till Death. I love Black Magic. I love the title track. I love Cryonics. I like Tom's vocals on this album. They're a little bit different. I like the guitar tones. I don't know. There's just something about this. It's raw. It's early Slayer, but it's very, very different. It's kind of new wave of British heavy metal. It's kind of like we're going to do what Venom did with maybe a little bit better musicality. I don't know. I just love it. I think it's great. It's been my favorite Slayer album for a long,
You know,
long
that's interesting, Pete. You know, it's funny. Megadeth is in a different space because it's later and Dave's gone through Metallica, but Slayer, Metallica, and Anthrax all have that fairly large percentage of traditional metal in their debuts, right?
especially on the debuts. Yeah, for
Which makes
sure.
them charming, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it just gives them a little bit of warmth or something.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure. No, I totally agree with it, which we really don't get on Megadeth's first album, I don't think, for me
No.
anyway. My number one is Peace Sells, but Who's Buying? I see personally, I love this album. And I think this is a massive upgrade over the first album. Uh, Granted, I ain't superstitious. Does not need to be on here. Just like kind of Anarchy in the UK on the next album, I don't have any space for that at all. However, Wake Up Dead is arguably my favorite Megadeth song of all time. I absolutely love it. I love the title track. I love The Conjuring. Devil's Island is so good. Good Morning Black Friday is absolutely terrific for me. I love Bad Omen. My Last Words is great. I love the guitar playing on this album. The technical riffs, the solos are brilliant. I like Dave's vocals. I like the production. I love this album. I saw them on this tour and they just absolutely blew me away. And yeah, this is my favorite by far out of anything in this time period. So
Wow, cool. Well, you're a big Prague
our
fan
tops and
too, right?
bottom are
So
way different.
it's proggy. I know, pretty wild. And yeah, I feel like mine is very posery with putting the 2 6 times platinum albums at the top, but it's just that idea that I just think they're the best songwriters of all these guys, right?
Yeah,
Kind of thing.
it's okay.
So
So
interesting.
yeah. So next week, we're going to go back to the kind of 70s US hard and heavy rock thing, where we did the kind of the bigger bands last week. We're going to go with the bands that were kind of influenced by those bands, and we're going to put all the albums together from Angel and Stars and Rex, Derringer. That's the Derringer band, not Rick's solo stuff. Riot and Legs Diamond. So I don't know how many albums there are. We haven't really counted them up, but there's at least 2 to 3 or 4 from all of them. So it'll be probably over 20. But
Yeah, it's not that many. And I've always put these bands together as that second wave American thing. These bands are all like the baby band version of Aerosmith, Ted, and Kiss kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Louis Chicago. So they're all operating roughly around the same time and same kind of labels and stuff. And yeah, just a few. And it's all and actually everything here is in a very tight time frame. In fact, it's all, let's see, Angel is their first album, 75. Angel is the outlier here. Everything else is well, Derringer 76. So yeah, everything is 75 or newer, put it that way. And almost all of it is 77 and newer.
Yeah. So it was all happening at the same time. So yeah, so this will be a fun.
And we're stopping at the end of the 70s, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's coming up next week, everybody. So your assignment for next week is to kind of take a look at all those albums, rank them as you like them. That's what we're going to do. And for today, we're curious to see how you're ranking all these big four thrash albums in the 80s. We'll move into the 90s on a future episode, so stay tuned for that. And Martin, get everybody caught up on what's going on with Contrarians, the podcast, and the books. Anything new to report?
Yeah, we had a Contrarians episode that went up called "Who Killed Prague" or "What Killed Prague" or "Did Prague Kill Itself?" We had our album cover show go up the other day. I've got the audio podcast, "History in 5 Songs" with Martin Popoff. The last one's about barely written songs, and all the books in that are at martinpopoff.com.
Cool. All right, coming up here, Ken Golden will be taking Martin's spot in the Zoom for the Professor's Picks. That's coming up later today. Lots of new records coming out today, so stay tuned for that. Tomorrow, we've got the UK Connection. So Stephen, Simon, and myself will be taking a look at 3 new wave of British heavy metal classics, one each from Diamond Head, Samson, and Demons. That's coming up tomorrow. And then Sunday is Ranking the Albums. Rick Lamonte and I will be doing our top 10 albums from Savoy Brown. So stay tuned for that and lots more here on the channel. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. For Martin Popoff, I'm Pete Pardo. See you next week here on the House. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.